She wore pearls. She served tea. She smiled through every lie. But in her garden, something was buried. This is the true story of Dorothea Puente, the sweet old woman who ran a boarding house full of secrets. Welcome to Last Words Lounge, where every whisper tells a deadly tale. 1980s, Sacramento, California. People whose society had forgotten and left with no one to turn to. After all, what could be more wholesome than an elderly woman caring for the less fortunate? Dorothea Puente her home to people who had nowhere else to go, the elderly, disabled, and unhoused. For these forgotten souls, she was a beacon of hope, offering them a place to stay with promises of warm beds and homemade meals. They wouldn't be alone anymore. Some even took on second jobs to afford the extra electricity and water needed for the growing number of tenants. At first, the neighbors loved her for it, praising her kindness and compassion. Because as time went on, something strange started happening. That face belonged to a social worker named Judy Moyes, who was worried about a kind, quiet tenant named Alvar Montoya, who hadn't been seen outside lately. People moved in and vanished. "I haven't seen that missing man in a long time," she said, "but if you want to check, you can dig up my yard." Then they kept digging and found another, then another, and then another. She wasn't just cashing their government checks. She was erasing them. As the years passed, more and more people found their way to Dorothea's doorstep. How could such a seemingly harmless woman be capable of so much evil? And while her home was big, it wasn't big enough to house everyone who needed her help. So instead, she rented out rooms to other people who didn't have as much money, hoping they would understand. She changed her name and tried to hide in plain sight, checking into a motel and taking odd jobs to earn money. And the community rallied around her, pitching in extra food and supplies. All seemed well until it didn't. He got a job somewhere else. She went to visit relatives. No one bothered checking. Eventually, someone recognized her from the news and tipped off the authorities. One day, a new face appeared on the street, looking for a missing person. She asked Dorothea if she'd seen him, but the older woman simply smiled and said, "Oh, he left to live with family." Judy wasn't convinced. Something about her tone sounded off. Then another person went missing, and then another, and soon a total of 8 people had vanished from Dorothea's home without a trace. Each time the police were called, she had a ready excuse. That was until one day when Dorothea herself invited the police over to her home. They did, and they found a body. It was clear that she'd used her charm to lure in vulnerable people, only to kill them and bury them in her garden. When the news broke, people couldn't believe it. The day the digging began, Dorothea told police she needed a coffee. And while they were distracted, she slipped out the back door and drove away. She made it all the way to Los Angeles before being caught. But as always, she stuck out because of her age and the pearls she wore around her neck. When the police finally got their hands on her, she said softly, "I didn't do anything wrong." But they knew better. In 1993, after a trial that gripped the nation, Dorothea Puente was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She died in 2011, still claiming her innocence, leaving behind a legacy of fear and sorrow. To some, she was a harmless grandmotherly figure who welcomed the lonely into her home and fed them until her dying day. But to those whose loved ones never left her home, she was something else entirely. A white house, a garden of roses, a smile that meant nothing at all. This has been Last Words Lounge. Subscribe for more softly spoken stories, mysterious, chilling, and never forgotten.